All right, so I printed off the color layer chart, and once you do this one time, you will know what needs to be skipped. Um, if you have software, you can even delete some of these steps and just resave it so you have it all set up. I prefer to do the quilting on my sewing machine for pillows because I want the quilting to be the whole pillow design. So you can see there's quilting on the hot pad and then quilting on the border. So I automatically skip the quilting, which is step, let's see, 25. So you also do not need the hot pad um, ribbon. So those two steps, and you do not need the final outline. You do not need, so you can go ahead and get rid of that. All right, step one is the full placement, which this is optional. You can run that or not. I do not run it because I kind of know how big I need my pieces of fabric. Step two, tacks down your batting. So if you are not going to use batting, which I do not, you will skip that step. If you decide to go ahead and use the what they call quilt as you go method, you go ahead and run your batting as the tutorial tells you and trim along the sides. Only put the batting in if you decide to go ahead and quilt the actual block in your hoop. If you're not going to quilt the block, you're going to do it on your sewing machine, you do not need the batting in this project, okay? You definitely want step three, which is going to show you all of your steps. And then you need all the steps for the design, including the sides, the full sides. So the only steps you need to get rid of are the last four, and then possibly step two if you are, again, not going to quilt it. So again, if you are going to quilt just the center block with the original quilting, put the batting in. If you're not, just leave it out. So the we're going to set this aside so you have it all printed out. You're going to follow the PDF on how everything's put together. But really, once you've done one of these foundation paper piece style hot pads, the techniques are all the same. So it's a stitch, flip, tack it into place, and trim it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So for the designs that I am going to use as not a hot pad, I use Tear Easy by Sulky. This is going to be your best bet for stabilizer because you are going to pull out the stabilizer and you don't want to mess up the stitch integrity. You do not need a lot of stabilization for just a single running stitch, but what you do need is you need a nice, clean, easy to pull out stabilizer for the end product. You do not want the stabilizer to stay in. If you are going ahead and doing the quilt as you go and quilting the block, I would use poly mesh as normal. You're not going to be able to get out all the stabilizer out of the center of that block to make into a pillow. So although it will make your seams very bulky, that's why I don't recommend doing the quilt as you go. If you have any sewing skills that you can just sew a straight line, you can quilt a pillow. So, all right. So tear easy. I went ahead and ran step three, which is all of the placement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create my tree, and I'll do that off camera. We are not going to go through those steps, but I will say I do go ahead and line up all of my fabric choices ahead of time. I don't wing this part of the tree because there's so many. So for the large, it's 6 fabrics. So I go ahead and lay out which ones and in what order. I also give them a really good starch and iron so they're nice and crisp. You want a nice, like, crisp edge when you fold over the fabrics, and the starch is going to help you finger press them into place so they're not loosey goosey. And it's just going to make a really nice finished block. So if you can do that, that's great. At minimum, you want to iron them, but starch is really going to be make a difference in this project. So I'll be back once my tree is put together, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so just wanted to show you real quick the seams of the tree and why the starch is a helpful step. So you want to be following the PDF, and the PDF tells you to trim all of your seams at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's not going to be perfect, obviously, because we're cutting in the hoop, but you can get it pretty close. You can see here. And if you're cutting the seam allowance at a 1/4, it will be really easy to line up that next piece of fabric. So you're only trimming across one edge. So with the starch, you can fold your fabric over, and some people have that seam presser. I just use um, the turning tool, and you can press it into place. It's going to give it a nice flat surface. And then once it's tacked into place, it's going to be nice and crisp. So you're going to do that for all of your seams. And so we're going to go ahead and build up the tree and then do the sides. Okay, so our quilt block is complete. I did not trim it yet. We're going to go over that. You can see this is what the back looks like. So you're going to go ahead and remove it from the hoop. And then I highly recommend leaving the stabilizer in while you trim. It's going to help you keep everything in line as you trim. So you can, I do cut off like the excess around the edges just to make it easier to trim down. And you can trim some of this excess fabric. When I cut it, I will save these for other blocks. You can easily make a template if you want to save fabric on the sides here. We note this in the PDF that solids or non-directional fabric is going to be best for the diagonal parts. It's going to be the easiest, maybe not the best, but easiest. But your trees, especially if they're prints, you're going to want something more neutral on the sides so that your tree stands out. And then on the pillow, I used multiple fabrics. So you have a lot going on. So a solid or a blender type fabric is going to be best. So this quilt block, the outline you can see here, here's the finished outline, is 10.5. And I tried to size the quilt blocks to an even number. So some of them are to the hoop size, like the 6 by 10 and the 7 by 11. And then we do have the 8 by 8 hoop, but then I also included a true 8-inch block. So the 8 by 8 hoop is actually 7.87. So it's not a true 8. So if you were going to use this block as a quilt block, the 8-inch block is going to be easier, but you have to have a 9 by 9 hoop to be able to do that block. So that is going to limit you. So if you do use the 8 by 8, you can always trim it down to 8 3/4, and that's going to make it easier to math out the sides of the border. So certain sizes like the 6 by 6 is actually 6.30. You can trim that down to 6.25. So like 1/4 inch increments are a lot easier to measure for quilt blocks if you've never quilted before. So it's just math wise a lot easier. So again, left the stabilizer in. I trimmed just inside of the outline, and that gives me a 10.5 inch block. So that's going to make math a lot easier. So on the pillow, on the 10, this is again the 10.5, the math works out that I wanted to use numerous fabrics. So you could just use a sashing, which is basically a border. So you could do one piece. So you don't have to do this, but if you want to do the squares, for the 10-inch block, it's 3-inch squares. So 4 down each side and then 6 across the top and the bottom. Okay, so as I was saying, the sides here are this is a 16-inch pillow form. The end measurement of this pillow once sewn together is about 15.5. So you have wiggle room for adding a little bit more, a little bit less, but the math is going to come in on how large you want your pillow. So if you're going to use the 10-inch block, but you have an 18-inch pillow, you're going to need to make your borders wider. So you're going to have to math this. And so for this one, again, 10.5 inch block, 3-inch block squares, or a 3-inch strip of border, and then you're going to want to cut it to 10.5 for each side. And then you'll have to, I didn't measure the top, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 times 3. So this is 18 inches here up top. So you have to, when you measure, include seam allowance. So your seam allowance should be 1/4 of an inch. So if you do an 8-inch block and you want to do 3 blocks, you're going to have to add a 1/2 inch to around for each block, and then divide that by 3 or 2 if you want to do 2 rectangles. So just don't forget the seam allowance. So once you finish your block here, you're going to go ahead, and that's when I remove the stabilizer. So this, again, this stabilizer, this Tear Easy, is going to be your best friend. We use this in all the clean stitch bags because it just comes out so nice, and it tears easy, just like it says it will. So we have that. So you don't want to yank again too hard because you don't want to pull out any of your stitching. So once your block is done, you basically, this is a quilt block. You can use it for anything. You could make 3 of these and make a small runner. You could make 5 of these and make a long runner. You could make a bag. You could use this, the center of a tote bag. You could make an entire quilt. You could, if you have the capability to do the 10.5 by 10.5, you could buy a layer cake, and that's the exact same size. And you could, you know, rotate, do 1 tree, 1 layer cake piece of fabric. So there's definitely lots of options. If you only have a smaller hoop, that's okay too. You could put 4 blocks together. You could do 2 blocks and then 2 squares of fabric together. Really, squares are, you know, the easiest thing to sew up. Just make sure that you have that seam allowance. So if you take, again, the 6 by 6 block and trim it down to 6 1/4, then you just cut your other blocks at 6 1/4, and then you can sew them together and make, you know, as large or whatever size pillow or runner you're going to make. So, all right, so here's our block. And again, you're going to take, I did 4 squares down each side, 6 across the top, 6 across the bottom, and they're just straight lines. So you're going to connect, it's easier to connect the sides first. So do 1, 2, 3, 4, then connect those to your block, and then do the top and the bottom. And that's going to yield you the top of your pillow. So the back, so then once your block is finished, that's where I do the quilting. So you're going to take a piece of fabric that's going to be on the inside. So like your liner, I just use a plain white fabric because that's what I have on hand. Then you're going to put down your batting, and then you're going to put down your finished quilt block with the sides here. So, and then I like to pin it up the block, like, I don't know, 6 or 8 pins to keep it all together. And quilting this can be a little bit like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not really a quilter, but it's really, really not hard, I promise. So this stitch that I used is on my machine. I just tested the length and adjusted the length on my machine on a scrap piece of fabric. You could also just do straight lines. So, and people go, oh, I can't, you know, keep a straight line. Well, you can use your ruler, and you can use a air erase pen and mark all of your lines with your ruler if you're worried that you can't keep them straight. Or they do have the foot guide that comes with most sewing machines that goes right onto your foot, and you can line that guide up with your next line and just keep sewing in straight lines, which is what I did here. So I lined up my foot, and then I had my guide here, and I just eyeballed it because it's, you know, squiggly, and just sewed. So the stitch length you're going to want to do that at, I think I did 3. I usually keep it to 3. Anything above that for me, I think, is too loose. So 3, a 3.0 stitch length. you go ahead and quilt your sandwich together and then trim it down so that the edges are, you know, nice and clean. And then we will discuss the back. Okay, so the back of the pillow is an envelope style pillow. This is very, very, very simple. It's a lot easier than putting in a zipper. I don't put zippers in for pillows at all. Like, forget that. So the way I measure these out again is going to be based on your size pillow form or finished size. So you want it to overlap. I do at least 4 to 5 inch overlap here. So I cut 2 pieces of fabric the size of the pillow, and then and I know I'm doing a little bit wasteful, but I like to lay it across each other and then go, okay, I want about this much. How much here? How much there? So then I fold it twice over and I hem both edges. And then you're going to lay one down and one over. So that creates the envelope, just like you do for a mug rug here. So this is about 4 or 5 inches, 4.5 inches from the top. And then this one that you can't see is also 4.5 inches. So what you want to do when you sew this, I'll turn this inside out, is you're going to have your basically your quilt block sandwich, right? And again, think of this as you're making a mug rug. This is what it looks like. So here is the quilt sandwich. You can see all the quilting. And this is, again, just a piece of random fabric. The edges are raw. It doesn't matter. You can use pinking shears if you want to keep the thread down when you wash them. So here is my back. So it's the first one goes down about 4.5 inches. Then you lay the second one down over the top, covering it for 4.5 inches. You want it to just be even. And then I trim off the excess so that I know it's exactly the size that I need. And then you're just going to simply stitch all the way around. Again, I use a 1/4 inch seam allowance because that's what's going to yield me the correct size for my pillow. And then you turn it right side out, back, and then insert your pillow form. So if you're going to make a runner, which I'm going to show you one of my runners. This is not in the hoop, but this is one of the runners that I've made. So you can do the traditional binding if you like to bind. I don't like to bind. It's not my favorite thing. So you can use this envelope back on your runner as well, which I have done numerous times. The only thing that you'll want to do is top stitch along the top of the runner. So here's, once you get it flipped, if you do the envelope and this is a runner, say it's this way, 4 or 5 trees together, I would top stitch, I would iron it and then top stitch along the top to keep it from rolling if you don't want to do the binding method. So anyway, hope this helps, and I hope that you have some more ideas to use our hot pads, and I can't wait to see them.